Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Hope everyone is doing all right. Let me check my volume. I just want to make sure. Always check your sound. It may seem unprofessional, as some people may say it. Yes, it breaks the norm and tradition of how other channels start. I agree. All right. Perfect. So first, before I start, I want to thank everyone for their support of the channel. You guys keep me ticking along. That's the first point. Second, if you enjoy the content, if you want to help in maintaining the content, you can either do it through Streamlabs, which is a little Vulcan or something would pop up, and thank you very much for your contribution, or through Patreon or PayPal. Also, people who are part of PayPal, you need to give me your titles or the items that you want to talk about from the standpoint of the video. We're maintaining the patron appreciation thing going forward. So essentially, patrons, at the bottom of the last video that is in Patreon, that is currently in Patreon, put what you want for the next video to be. My wife and I are looking at the Patreon page today and to make changes or to kind of fulfill the obligations that I guess were put there when this was first started. So there's that. I think that's everything. So let's start this one. Aaron Buzzsaw Matei. I keep calling the man a Buzzsaw, and I keep saying if you're walking in a dark street by yourself and Aaron Matei is on the other side of that street, if you've said anything but the Russia stuff, walk the other way. Don't engage. Keep your eyes down. Walk the other way. Engage him like you're engaging a predator, because you are engaging a predator. Aaron Matei, and I gotta be honest, I love him for it. Aaron Matei wasn't my favorite person on Real News Network. It was Paul J. When Paul J started, Paul J looks like a newsman, and I trust those old-fashioned newsmen in the way they look. Aaron Matei, this upstart, who is this upstart? This upstart has grown to be one of my favorite people. Now, I say that to say that in one story after the next, he's just critical and skeptical. And he's somewhat cynical in what these people are trying to push over on the public, especially with this idea of what they're trying to push the public into. This idea of conflict. This idea of us versus them. There's always an enemy. There's always somebody else that you got to fight. Some war. Somebody else that needs shot. Never shot a man that didn't deserve it. That type of stuff. Well, yeah, I am going to be skeptical on things like that, especially when there's a track record and there's a history of those things turning out poorly. We've killed millions. Do you understand that? Understand that. Let the gravity of that sink in. 1 million people no longer on the face of this earth. And that's not even getting to Libya. That's not getting to these places that go unnamed. These wars that no one talks about. Aaron Matei has a conversation with James Risen. James Risen was the reporter that put the story out about Reality Winner. Reality Winner was, I know this is a long trail, but in a nutshell, and I love this story, and I'm glad that he is staying up on this story because this is one of those stories that I'm fascinated by. The Intercept typically does God's work. That's the way I see it. I see God's work as being humanitarian causes. That's the way I see it. Any type of media outlet that is going to be antagonistic towards power is going to have to position themselves in a way where people talk to them, where people are willing to leak information to them. Hey, this government is doing X. Hey, we're doing Y. When Wesley Clark comes out and says, we're going to take out all of these different nations, somebody had to leak that to him. Somebody told him that. Yes, he was in a position of authority, but that guy wasn't supposed to tell him that. In order for him to tell us, somebody had to leak it to him. I'm making a point that if you're a media organization and people need to leak you stuff for you to get that stuff to the public, you need to protect those people that are leaking you things. Enter one Reality Winner. This young woman believed that there was some bit of information that was enough of interest to the public that she had to leak that information, and she leaked that information to the Intercept. The Intercept, in turn, released enough of that information to where within an hour or so after the document was published, she was in custody, she was in chains. The Intercept hasn't answered for that. What did you do? What was your process that allowed that person to be put in chains like that? I understand she was doing God's work, But why is she in chains? I understand that just because people do good doesn't necessarily mean good follow, but it was your job to protect her as she gave information to us. Nobody answered for that. Now, Aaron Matei has brought the same point up because it's a damn good point. How do you fail to protect your sources? And if you fail to protect your sources, where would those sources go if those sources are stifled because of processes that you've let fall to the wayside? The person who published the story, James Risen, was on the show. Now, you can imagine how this was going to go. This is the guy that pushes the Russia stuff. And what Aaron Matei asked him was very basic and very simple. You've gone on the publishing networks and you've talked about what's been published, what this woman released. This doesn't say what you says it says. You're saying that this is hacking. You're saying that Russia is attacking democracy. You're saying that Russia is attacking the United States. And this is, at best, just looking at the data, just looking at what you've put out, a spear phishing attempt. Now, a spear phishing attempt is not typically used with the language of hacking. It's a spear phishing attempt. They're trying to get you to go to a page where they can take your information. Okay. Is that tantamount to attacking democracy? Is that the same thing as Russian hacking the United States? The language is problematic because the language gets across something that's not necessarily indicative of reality. So you can imagine it's a little awesome that the guy who wrote the story is there to defend his story. Guess how this is going to go? Guess how this went? Ryzen on the show defending himself. In fact, let's try to use this one.
They get away with it.
Okay, Jim. So I have no disagreement with what you say there about the double standards at play in terms.
Oh, by the way, I don't want to drop you in the middle. What he's asking him, he's saying essentially, look, it's a double standard. They put that woman in prison for 5 years. That's not fair. Granted, none of it's fair. It's a complete double standard. Hillary Clinton should be perp walked. I absolutely agree with you. While at the same token, this woman who released something that was pertinent to the debate, at least. I mean, if there's somebody who's saying there's an analyst who believes that XYZ may be true, maybe you release that, maybe you don't. It depends on the situation. The analyst may be wrong. The analyst may be new. All sorts of things can be true. There may be somebody else who looks above that analyst's shoulder and say, hey, nah, that's not necessarily a good idea. There are all sorts of things that could be within that mix. But this is, what you're being asked is a little different. The Russia stuff hinges to some degree, meaning the only public real information, meaning the hard data that people are putting out. This is the main thing. This is the brick. Now, no, nobody is saying that this is the entirety of it all. And no, nobody's saying that this completely disproves the narrative and everything else. But a lot of people are using this to build a bunch of other stuff on. And if this is extremely flimsy, now, and beyond that point, they didn't even get to the point of, why is this woman in prison? Why is this woman in prison? What did you do? But I don't want to drop you in the middle. I want to give you a pretext of what's going on. Nobody is disagreeing with him that this is an important document to release. Even if it's maybe they're trying to do X or maybe somebody's trying to do X. No disagreement. This is more of a different question, and he's going to elucidate him. Yeah, here we are. He's going to make it clear.
Of the selective prosecution and also just the harsh treatment of this case. 5 years in prison.
Yeah, right.
But let me ask you, what you're also talking about there speaks to what the document actually contains. You say that it alerted the country to a Russian threat to national security and a Russian effort to attack voting systems. Let me ask you, do you think that the document itself actually substantiates that?
Well, I mean, it shows that the U.S. intelligence community, specifically the NSA, had intelligence about that. That there was, I mean, you can debate whether or not the U.S. intelligence community knows what it's doing, and I'll be happy to debate that because I've been a critic of U.S. intelligence for 20 years. But what it did say was that the U.S. intelligence, namely the NSA, had evidence that GRU hackers were attempting to hack into a contractor for voting systems that were used at the state level, and also trying to hack personally into state election officials around the country. Now that is something, frankly, that should not have been classified. That should have been a public warning issued by the U.S. intelligence community to states around the country. And for the most part, those kind of things usually are, the government does warn people about cyber attacks. But this, to me, the fact that they went after somebody for disclosing a document that all it did was warn state officials that they should be on guard against Russian cyber attacks is ridiculous. Because, as I said, the Senate Judiciary Committee, in a report earlier this year, pointed out specifically at the failures of the government, the federal government, to warn state officials about this, and that it was only these press disclosures that finally alerted state officials to the threat. And if that's, to me, the definition of a public service act of whistleblowing.
Right. So I would agree that the intent was a public service. She obviously had this document that she thought would show that the Russians are meddling in U.S. voting systems, and she wanted to alert the public, especially a website like the Intercept, which has been associated with challenging that through the writings of Glenn Greenwald. But when you say that the document shows the NSA as evidence, let's go through the document, because I don't think it shows that. And this is where I think the Intercept did not fully explain to readers what the document actually said. And the reason why I think this is important is because this document is the only actual public evidence we have so far that attributes voting hacking attempts to the Russian government. And
this starts to get brutal. This starts to get very brutal. Look, I don't think anybody disagrees that the document or whatever she released, meaning this document that they're about to go through, that Aaron Matei is about to essentially piece through, is important per se, from the standpoint of, I think this is important, I think people should leak the document, etc., etc. That's not my issue with this at all. I mean, we can go through the credibility of the document, we talk about all that. I agree with the protection of the whistleblower almost as an absolute. And yes, I know that gets, anything to an absolute looks ridiculous to a certain degree, but for most points, I agree with the idea of the whistleblower. That's not our disagreement here. The disagreement here is whether or not this document substantiates what's being hefted upon it as it being this level of evidence for some attack on democracy itself by the Russian government. Let's let him keep going. I want Aaron Matei to nail this down, because he goes through this in a way that's better than I think I've seen up to this point by anybody else.
It's been the basis for a lot of fear about that alleged Russian hacking since. So if you look at the document, there's a legend, and I want to explain it to viewers. And you can't see this, Jim, because you're on the phone with us, but for viewers who are watching, we're going to put it up. So there's a legend, and there are different color codes. So there's a gray line for contextual information, a yellow line for analyst judgment, and a green line for confirmed information. And when you look at the actual attribution on the document in terms of its basis for attributing this to the Russian government attribution does not get a green line for confirmed information. It first gets a yellow line in saying it's probably within the GRU, but that's an analyst judgment of that fact that it's probably within the GRU. So it's not confirmed information. And then furthermore, then there's a gray line for contextual information linking the cyber actor that this analyst judgment says is probably within the GRU. Then the gray line links the GRU to this actor that that allegedly carried out the spear phishing attempt. So if anything, the document itself shows that the NSA, at least according to this document, is not even sure, does not have confirmed information. It's the GRU. It's simply the judgment of one analyst. And I'm wondering if, based on that, you are open to the possibility that the significance of this document has been inflated.
I am sympathetic to Rising on this. I'm a person. I am. I get it. You've released information into the world. And in releasing information into the world, perhaps you didn't do due diligence in the way you released that information. And in doing so, a young woman is going to prison for 5 years. Now, I've already said that I think the Intercept normally does God's work. I think that woman, when she released that information, was doing God's work. But it is also possible that what she released does not necessarily indicate what she is saying it indicates. And in doing so, she's going to prison for no reason. If you are the person responsible for that, how do you deal with that? And can you deal with that knowing that she's going to prison, knowing that you may be in some degree responsible for her going to prison, and also knowing that what she released was not what you thought it was? Let's let him answer.
I disagree with you on this point. I think that you can always debate the evidentiary basis for U.S. intelligence reporting. I'm a skeptic more so than probably anybody else in journalism about U.S. intelligence reports over the years. But I think the fact remains that this was an important document for the public to know about.
And see, right here, I can't tell if he's intentionally doing this or if it's clear at this point that the conversation is not about whether or not the document was important. The document. Aaron Maté is asking him about the legitimacy of the document, meaning, is this document indicating what you're saying it's indicating? On Democracy Today, Democracy Now!, the hyperbolic language that he was using, this attack on the United States and all this other stuff, in a document that what you've just been demonstrated to and shown, none of this hyperbolic language of Russia attacking democracy, Vladimir Putin riding across the ocean on a bear in order to eat democracy itself, none of that. The basic boil down, what do they have, what have you seen? And the fact is, there's a woman that's going to prison for 5 years for what amounts to an analyst's opinion, a person's judgment. And it's not even a confirmed judgment. I want to show you another part to this also towards the end. Aaron Maté repeats himself in this interview, but I think he repeats himself because he wants to make clear that what people are saying they have, they don't have. If you're basing it on this, you're basing it on a flimsy piece of evidence, not a definitive thing. There's a difference in those things. Let's look at the end of this, because the end of this gets pretty testy.
I think what you're arguing is that we should hold back information if we don't think it's complete.
No. Okay, Jim, you're not getting my point. I think the Intercept should have published it. But instead of a headline talking about how this is about Russia hacking into U.S. elections, I think the headline should have been, the NSA itself is unsure of the evidence about Russia hacking the elections, because it's right there on the document.
Well, I think that's...
Please understand the difference, because there's a massive difference. Like that doesn't apply. Well, it kind of does apply. It's me. It's my channel. You get it. When I used to do the remote viewing stuff, you're sitting in a room and you're trying to, you just think of whatever comes to mind. The information that you get sometimes becomes contextual, meaning it's not exactly right, but it's close to it to get across what you're trying to see. But this is not what's taking place. They have a document. They have something they can see. You can look exactly at it. You don't have to be hazy and contextual about it. What do you got? What do you have? Just tell me what you have. And Aaron Maté is making a point to him that the description that you gave of the thing that you had access to was wrong. It wasn't right. And you could have written that away that would have gotten across something to the public that was less hyperbolic than what you wrote. Yes, I'm criticizing what you use as a header because a header is the context of what's in the document. If you give people a wrong indication of what's in a document, you're going to get a large section of people who will walk away from that thinking that something was in it that wasn't in it. Because most people don't read, or a large number of people don't go into the document itself. I hope that makes sense. Let's keep going. I'm gonna let Matei finish.
Your opinion of how the headline should have been written, which is fine. You can write a letter to the editor and complain about the headline.
Well, I'm talking to you now, and you know the distinction on the document because you're familiar with it. The distinction between confirmed information and
I'm not sure what the point of this argument about is really, frankly. So unless you want to talk about something else, I think I'm done.
Okay, well, I've certainly made my point. I guess one other piece of evidence on this document that I found interesting was that in terms of this spear phishing attempt, which is different, by the way, than the hacking as we're normally known as. It's about impersonating someone to try to steal their credentials. The fake emails that the suspected Russian hackers used were to impersonate this company, VR Systems, by the way, which denies that they were ever successfully penetrated. But anyway, it was VRelections@gmail.com and also no reply automatic service at gmail.com. So the impersonated emails used by these hackers to try to fool VR Systems and then also state election boards was using the domain at gmail.com. So which doesn't seem to me to be very sophisticated.
I love the smirk. When he gives you the smirk, oh, you fucked up when he gives you the smirk. When that smirk comes out, that means he's got you. I mean, ultimately, we've had a conversation. I've talked to the guy himself that's released it. And this guy himself is getting frustrated with me because, I'm asking him things that he can't answer. And things that I'm saying to him does not have a good answer. Because what I'm getting at is the underlying pillars that you guys have been using to prop this up are flimsy. They're flimsy. When they're put under criticism, they fall away. And Aaron Matei is showing him the document. He's like, I'm looking at this document, and this document is not saying what you say it says. Defend it. I have to run away, sir. Wait. Before you run away, about the person who you got in prison. Let's talk about her. Oh, yeah, I got to flee. I must flee. Let's let him flee. I want him to flee. Fleeing is funny to me.
Yeah, okay. So are you one of the people who doesn't believe that there's any evidence that Russia's intervened in the U.S. election?
I'm one of the people who is skeptical of accepting U.S. intelligence community claims without evidence. And that's why I think...
Well, that's fine. That's a completely different debate and discussion than I thought you wanted to have, which is fine, but it's not something I have the time or the interest in pursuing right now. I thought you wanted to talk about why I thought Reality Winner, what she did was a public service.
We agree it was a public service. There's no debate there.
Okay,
and I think you've articulated that. Jim Risen. Are you still there?
Well, good.
Yeah. So let me ask you, Jim, let me ask you also then about the handling of the document itself, because there's been criticism.
Well, I'm not going to get into that. I think we're done.
I got to be honest. The ending of that annoyed me greatly. It doesn't matter if I'm annoyed. I get annoyed all the time. Everybody gets annoyed. It's just a, point of consciousness, getting out of configuration. It's possible that the handling or something that you did has ruined a person's life. Right? I mean, there's a person, for a nice looking woman. It's a beautiful picture. She's in prison. She's in a cage right now. Again, doing God's work. It's not unfair to ask, hey, you the guy that wrote the story, is it possible that in the handling of this, you've messed up? And in messing up, has the Intercept changed its policies? Has it done something different in the way that it goes about achieving or approving information than it did prior? She's in a cage. The handling of these things ended up with this woman in a cage. And yeah, I understand it's uncomfortable to have a conversation with Aaron Matei because he's going to ask you difficult questions. But maybe a little bit of penance is answering those difficult questions and having some come to Jesus on let's not do things that end up fucking up to a degree where we end up getting people put in a cage. Nobody is questioning whether or not the document should be released. We're questioning the handling of the documents, how you went about releasing the documents. Those are different things. And Aaron Matei is not wrong for asking about it. And if anything, you should have stood there and let him ask you whatever he wanted to ask you. All right. I'm not going to keep this one long. But again, Matei eats another person alive. I keep saying, grab your kids. Grab your women and kids. If you're walking down the street and Matei is walking in the in your direction, man, because that guy is a beast. Matei is a beast. All right, who's here? Bob Romero said, this is just another manifestation of the establishment's bitter disappointment that Hillary, lost the election. Yes, Bob, agreed. The level of desperation confirms what a good thing that loss was for all of us. I almost agree with you, Bob. If the world doesn't come to an end between now and the next election, I would agree with you. Captain Obvious, I've never been able to get past Reality Winner's name. Yeah, it trips me out, but her middle name is Lay. Like, I didn't know what they were talking about before because Reality Winner is so contextual, right? Like, it's like saying, if you look up Reality Winner, you may get her picture, but you're going to also get Reality Winners, if that makes sense. Like, the name is contextual, so it screws you up. Usually it's contextual to a person. Jamarl Thomas, that's contextual to who I am. It's my identifier. Well, Reality Winner is contextual in and of itself beyond just being the identifier. It's so fucking weird. Yeah, agree. National Security Correspondent. What does that even mean? I love that. Let's see. All right. I love that. This is, but dude, I think you're right, Bob. I agree with you, Bob. There's no disagreement in that statement, Bob. I'm angry. And to some degree, I don't think I'm alone. And what I think is that what's taking place from the standpoint of their hysteria is matched by, you could say, I guess, our not giving a fuck, if that makes sense. It's a level of desperation that pisses you off that much more. My wife and I, as a hallmark of growth, I've come to some conclusions about being at home. And not at home, but being, I know this sounds weird, but after being on Vin's story, I came to several conclusions. It's very weird to interact with people in not necessarily radically different worlds, because they weren't radically different, but it's like you. No, that sounds weird. It's out of topic. It's just I look at certain things, and I think from the standpoint of growth. And in dealing with my wife, her and I had this conversation today where we got into this mini argument because I pick up on the impression of others, and I am okay as long as the other person is okay, and I have this horrible thing of matching the temperament of the other person to some degree. So I always told her, I was like, if you're good to me, I'll be awesome to you, but it's never going to be a situation where I'm just horrible to you. That type of thing. And I'm trying to get past that because I think I don't want how I am to be in any way controlled by somebody else in the way they go about their affairs. She said something to me today. I think it was, but it was shorthand. It was like if somebody, like there's certain things that I'm assuming of you or that I'm assuming you know. And when I don't respond to you in the way that you expect me to respond to you, you get mad because it's like you're supposed to know what I'm talking about. In which case, I get pissed off because it's like, how dare you assume that I'm supposed to know what you're talking about? And then having to explain that out in detail, which she hates because she doesn't necessarily like having that many words. Yeah, I forget what we're talking about. It's kind of besides the point. 2 times, Jamal, just 5 seconds to pray, to realize her new reality. Sorry to be soppy, to let us remember her new world. Yeah. I do, and this is kind of why I do this story. I feel shitty about this. Like, that was her. Wherever she was in this moment, that was her. Think about where you are in this moment. And then the very next one, this. You question whether what she did was right or wrong. I would argue it wasn't wrong. Now, The problem comes in, how do you know that the analysis was right? And how do you even know that that would even be released? If that makes sense. Like, there's all sorts of things that you talk about internally that you don't necessarily release to the world. Either way, she shouldn't be sitting in a prison cell, but she is. It makes me feel shitty about it, which is why I do this story and why I'm hard on the Intercept on this. I feel like there's somebody who's lost her life. So yeah. Mr. K, James Rising has already lost 2 sources, Jeffrey Sterling and Reality Winner. Is this the one who lost the other source too? One of the guys who also gave himself up, I can't think of his name right now, my brain's not working all that well today. He kind of made that point too, saying that the Intercept has the answer for this. The Intercept has the answer for this. Alright, I'm going to end this one. Alright guys, I have another story that I'm going to do after this. Let's hop across the pond. We haven't talked about Britain in a while. I don't know what it is. My brain seems to be a little bit off today. I'm reaching for words and they're not there, but let's keep this thing ticking. I'll see you guys in like 10 minutes or so. Thanks, everyone. Oh, by the way, if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through Patreon, and if that's not working, through PayPal. My wife said, she said, I was like, I'm off. Like, doing this is a little weird. It's usually, I've done software for the entirety of the time that I've worked. And you get accustomed to this idea in a career that this is what I'm doing, so this is what I'm going to do. And there's no reason to do anything else because there's a lower level of energy in just kind of fixing whatever you need to fix with regards to whether or not you like this as opposed to switching to something else. Not to mention this thing of uncertainty in whatever you're doing. If you say, hey, I need an application to do X, well, I already have the tool set to make an application that does X. If you say, I'm going to do a show about Y, then the difference of it is I don't necessarily know everything that's going to come out in the show before the show takes place, meaning I can't necessarily forecast what's going to be there. So you reach for a word, and the word is either there or it's not. You have an idea of what you want to say, but how you say it is kind of like a stream of consciousness. It's just weird. Just an odd change of events. All right, I'm going to end this. I will be back probably in about 10 or 15 minutes. All right, guys. Have a good one.